So one of the questions I get asked all the time is, can I just rent a property on Airbnb? Do I actually have to own the property? I get this question a lot from a lot of new time investors into the short-term rental world. So there's pros and cons of either strategy. I've actually done both. We actually tried to do what's called arbitrage, where you basically just rent somebody else's place. Imagine you find a landlord that has a 12-month lease, right? And you just want to take over the existing lease and just say, hey, I'll guarantee you the rent. Maybe it's $2,000 a month. And you turn their rental into an Airbnb in which you guarantee their rent on a 12-month lease. And you just basically throw it out on Airbnb or VRBO, whatever, and rent that place out as a short-term rental. There are definitely pros and cons to both strategies, whether it's ownership versus renting. And this video, we're going to dip into that. So let's talk about it. So on the arbitrage model, where you basically take over somebody else's lease, the biggest pros of that is basically you can jump into, you can scale up really quick, and obviously all you have to do is sign a lease, right? You don't have to go through the finding the property, closing the property, renovating a property, all that kind of stuff. The property's ready to go. You might want to make minor improvements to the property just to make it more attractive and increase your potential nightly rate, or total revenue for that matter, with occupancy. However, usually your only cost or capital is going to be on the furniture and furnishings, right? So maybe you need to spend anywhere from $5,000 to $10,000, $15,000, depending on how big the place is. Typically, it's going to be smaller 2-3 bedroom rentals. So that is definitely a big advantage. And of course, you can scale super quick. So, if you found 10 owners in a month, that are willing to let you basically sublease their place, you can scale very quickly to, let's say, 20, 30, 40 short-term rentals by doing the arbitrage model. That is awesome in the fact that you need little to no capital. Oftentimes they're not going to be furnished rentals, but maybe you find a midterm rental that is just, they've already furnished them, and you can go down that path. So it is possible actually to do it with almost no capital. But those are probably the biggest advantages, is the scalability and the fact that you need very little capital. And of course, there's tons of landlords out there that may be interested in the idea if you can guarantee their rent, or maybe you give them like an extra couple $100 versus what they're going to get on their market rent or their current lease. So those are probably the pros there. The cons, though, is, think about this. If you take the time to, let's say you fix up the place a little bit, or maybe you don't, you just put all that furniture in there, you still had to stage it, set everything up, create the listing, go through all the motions to get it onto Airbnb and what other booking platforms that you're using. And then the landlord decides he doesn't want you to operate anymore, or maybe he wants to, or he or she wants to sell the place. Maybe there's an HOA that shuts you down. It's not as sustainable or stable, I should say, as owning a place. So those are probably the biggest cons with it. And typically in these situations, if you can get a single family home, it also reduces your downtime. But I see a lot of people doing the arbitrage model in apartments and condos and townhomes. And the other problem with that is typically there's HOAs, but you also have a lot of neighbors. So neighbors usually don't, want to live right next to an Airbnb or whatever directly next door. So you can also have tenant problems, or, neighbor problems, I should say, directly next door too, which can be an issue. Depending on which strategy you're using, if you are going to do the arbitrage model. So that's that part. But let's talk about ownership. This is what we do. This is what we prefer. This is what I would recommend if you can make it happen. And there's some ways that, capital is not a constraint. So obviously the biggest advantages of owning is you get the equity build, right? If you pay down that mortgage, you're going to get equity build over time. That's the beauty of real estate. You're also going to get the other advantages of owning real estate, which is appreciation over time. You're going to get the tax incentive, tax deductions on the mortgage interest or anything else, such as a cost segregation that you may do in the future. And of course, you're getting the cash flow just like you're going to get on the arbitrage model. So with that said, it gives you a lot more options and a lot more incentives to actually hold the real estate. And that is definitely what I would say is the most lucrative side of ownership, but also you have full control. I mean, you guys can do whatever you want to do when you own the property. When you arbitrage from an owner where you're going to sublet out, you're limited in what you can do to the property. You're always going to be subject to the fact that they might kick you out, change their mind. And of course, like I said, you may have other issues with neighbors or HOAs that might come in play just because of the type of rentals that are typically out there that you're going to have to try to sublet with landlords. But the cons, of course, of ownership is the capital, right? It takes longer to find a deal and to close a deal, or a property, I should say. And then, of course, the capital that's involved with down payment and closing costs and obviously any fix-up you got to do. But to be honest, capital should never be an issue. Capital can come from partners. It can come from private equity. It can come from other sources of funds. So I would just say, I've put out videos on this too. Don't ever let capital stop you from buying and owning. I see this mistake being made a lot. Sometimes you just have to figure out how to go about partnering with other people if you yourself don't have the capital. But those are, the pros and cons of both strategies. At the end of the day, if you really want to create wealth and a stabilized business, ownership is definitely the way to go. If you literally don't have any capital or very little capital and you just want to test this whole thing out and you can find a landlord that is willing to let you rent their place out or sublet it out for that matter, then by all means, go ahead and try it. I can just tell you that long-term, you'll build a better business in this game, especially, over time with ownership. So hope this video helps with you guys, make that decision. If you guys have any questions or comments, feel free to leave them in the video comment section. And if you want to catch the next video, do subscribe. I've been in this business for 15 years and I've pretty much seen it all, done it all, and happy to help. So I'll be putting out more videos and I'll see you guys on the next one.